Okay. 3 seconds. 5 seconds to be on the safe side. Good morning, Kahal Kadosh, Beruchim Habayim to everybody. Today, Wednesday, the 27th day of Adar the 2nd, corresponding to the 30th of March 2022. Today's class graciously sponsored by Mr. Clemente Beda and family Le'ilui Nishmat, his beloved sister, Latife Bat Sara Aliyah Hashalom. Additionally, today's class graciously sponsored by A.B. Franco for the Refuah Shelema of our dear friend and member Charlie Saka Yeshaya Ben Laura. Additionally, today's class graciously dedicated for the Refuah Shelema of Svetel Sara Bat Rachel Hinda by her family, among all of the Halim of Am Israel. We see the news coming from Eretz Israel, and we are not happy. We are not happy for many reasons. But one thing I have to say, you know, when we mentioned last week that the merit of Tzaddikim protects their generation and protects the city where they live. Yesterday, and I'm quoting what the great rabbi from Eretz Israel said, one of the great Rosh Yeshiva from Devora, and he says that since the passing of the great Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, Zichrono Livracha, terrorist attacks in Israel increased. Not like we never had them, but Devora was hardly in the news because of terrorist attack, with the exception of yesterday. That regretfully was a large terrorist attack. 5 people, I think, 5 casualties, I believe. I don't know how many wounded. So we hope and pray, Be'ezat Hashem, that the zechut of the Tzaddikim shield us, and the zechut of Am Israel and the Teshuvah and increased Torah learning will bring only good news coming from Eretz Israel. Because we have a kelal. What happens in Eretz Israel, the Zohar Kadosh writes, has a direct effect on the world. It has a domino effect. And there are 2 stages of what happened in Israel. One is Israel from the Torah perspective, and the dangers of Israel from the secular perspective. And we know, regretfully speaking, that what's happening in Israel now, maybe the war with the Arabs, it's a powerful war that has been going on for the past 1300 years, from the time of, more actually, from the time of Ishmael and Ishaq. But no one can deny that there is also a spiritual struggle in certain governmental rules going on in Israel. And we need to remember that Eretz Israel, as we learned in last week's Perashah, and Am Israel needs to carry the flag of Kedusha. The Pasuk says, B'tkadishtem b'item kedoshim ki kadosh ani. Although this Pasuk in the Gemara has a whole different meaning, but the literal meaning of the verse doesn't change its content. That Am Israel aims for Kedusha, aims for holiness and godliness. If it's through the holiness of marriage or childbearing and physical relationships, etc., as we have been discussing in honor of Perashat Tazria, all these topics, engagements, married time, pregnancy, God forbid, abortion, etc., these are all topics that do take a toll in the essence of Kedusha in Am Israel and in Eretz Israel. If doing a mitzvah outside of Israel carries a huge value and weight, spiritually speaking, doing a mitzvah in Eretz Israel, it's a mega prize. Even if the person walks 4 steps in Eretz Israel, that by itself is a zechut, which is, by the way, if you remember Yaakov and Esav. Remember Yaakov and Esav? Yaakov was afraid of Esav. Now, there are many explanations. What does it mean that Yaakov was afraid of Esav? But there was one thing that we have learned, that Esav, despite his actions and everything else, as a person, as a human being, as a Jew, Esav, thank you very much.
Beat me to it.
Thank you. Esav did fulfill 2 mitzvot of the Torah based on his own parameters. Number 1, honoring his parents. Esav lived next to his parents, and Yaakov was living out of the country. If your parents live next to you, and you have a brother who lives overseas, who gets to do the mitzvah of honoring the parents more often? The brother who lives next to the parents. That's exactly what happened with Esav. But you know what the Mefarshim say? That Esav was living in Eretz Israel, and Yaakov was living outside of Eretz Israel. And that fear that Esav lived in Israel, that means that every step that Esav took in Israel is a mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Israel. It's a very powerful concept that even Yaakov Avinu said, Uli, what's going to be with me? The Gemara discusses, which is not the topic of today, if a person is allowed to live outside of Eretz Israel. It's a debate in the Gemara. We live outside of Israel because we are in Galut. We are in exile. But obviously, we all know that our ultimate destination, our final boarding pass, needs to say Eretz Israel. Now, I have and we'll resume the class, time allowing, that I'd like to invite Nir Solomon. Sit to my right, please, because the left is the hot seat, and could be with the water and coffee. You know that we don't have really too many guest speakers that come, and even some may come. That doesn't mean that we give them the platform to speak, for many different reasons. But I think that for today's class is apropos to hear a bit from him, just to introduce him and move the microphone or the camera to be next to me. Very nice. He represents, maybe you're now the new leader of Efrat. So Efrat, this is not a fundraising. This is creating awareness of a topic relevant to the parasha of today and a problem or a challenge that society is experiencing. Anyone that would like to hear more details, he'll be here for a few minutes after the class. You can approach him. But let me introduce you this program, which I'm very familiar with for many, many, many years. Perhaps you don't recognize him because there was a great person before him, right? That was in the leadership of the institution by the name of Dr. Eli Schussheim. Dr. Schussheim, for many, many, many years, was, as long as that he was alive, he was the director, we can call it, of Efrat. Efrat is a wonderful institution in Eretz Israel that does one of the most difficult jobs that a person can imagine. We get many people that come from Israel, some representing a synagogue, some representing yeshivot, kolelim, needy families, needy brides, needy people. In this case, you know what this individual sitting next to me does? He prevents abortions in Israel. I repeat, he prevents abortions in Israel. I am not happy to say this. I am happy to speak about happy topics. But regretfully, and everything is divine providence, because yesterday, for those that were here, which we got a lot of good feedback, what was one of the topics that we learned yesterday? In vitro. Fertility treatments. Getting pregnant. How pregnancy works. But regretfully, and I'm controlling myself in what I'm going to say, but regretfully, in some circles of the Israeli society, there is a government-sponsored bill to cover 2 abortions per year. Correct?
Yep.
Sad. Very sad. If it's in the goyim of the world, which is also a problem, you need to know this. And the American society needs to know. Abortion is one of the 7 Noahide laws. Lo tirsah. Do not kill. So goyim also have the prohibition of abortion. Goyim also have the prohibition of same-gender relationship. Lo tin'af. So don't think for a moment that these topics, which from a Torah perspective are forbidden, the rest of the humanity and the world, they get an easy pass. The opposite, which is one of the reasons why the Mabul in the time of Noah happened, which was way before the giving of the Torah. So at this moment, I'm going to stay quiet, which I don't usually do. It's one of my nisyonot to stay quiet. But at this moment, I will stay quiet and I will give the microphone to him. Just to give a brief introduction, he's a professional, you're a professional, if I understood correctly, you're an attorney.
Correct.
In what field?
Corporate attorney.
Corporate law. But he found a mission in his life to devote part of his very valuable time to help this institution to develop. And I will tell you a secret now. Probably he has more information that I'm going to give. But since I'm affiliated to them for many years, I know them, I knew the doctor, alav shalom, and I believe that he even treated my father in Eretz Israel, because both of them knew each other from Uruguay. He was from Uruguay, right?
Argentina.
Argentina. Actually,
Yeah.
we lived in Argentina. My father came from Egypt, went to Uruguay, and from Uruguay, he went to Argentina. I was born in Argentina, Aira Kodesh, after Yerushalayim, Brooklyn, and Deal, just for the American crowd. But the rabbi and his holy angels, I believe that from the inception of this institution, they were able to save 80,000 or more.
Now it's almost 81,000.
81,000 babies. Think, let it digest. 81,000 babies. I personally, my wife and I, adopted a few of these babies. Not physically, financially. I even have the certificates at home. I have it. I never follow up. I'm embarrassed to do so. But I have the child's face, the date of birth. Yes. Now, I'm not bragging about it, but I said to myself, Do you understand what does it mean? You save a neshama for $1,500. I pay it monthly, $150 a month. In my days was a bit lower, but things change. And you'll be surprised, and I'm going to give over the mic, of why some couples in Israel may decide to abort, especially when they are married. I'm going to give over the mic. His English is perfect. That means that I don't have to translate.
Rabbi, the truth of the matter is maybe it's better for you to have the mic because I think your words resonate very strong with your support. In fact, Chazal tell us, Vayikra Hashem el Moshe, Vayikra Hashem el Moshe. So Chazal in the Midrash, darshan from there, Rabbi Chanilai Omer, he darshans the pasuk in Tehillim, which I'd like to say about your rabbi. It says, Baruchu Hashem melachav, giborei koach, osei dvaro, lishmoa bekol dvaro. Chazal ask, which malachim are we speaking about? Are we speaking about malachei shamayim? Are we speaking about malachei aretz? Because it's in reference to Moshe Rabbeinu. So say Chazal in Midrash Rabbah, there on the pasuk, it's talking about the earthly malachim. How do we know? Because it says in the next pasuk, Baruchu Hashem kol tzeva'av, meshartav osei retzono. In other words, those that are in the heavens don't have a choice to do good. They must do good. We have a choice whether we want to do good or not. Your rabbi has a choice whether to open up his arms and embrace such an unbelievable mitzvah, and your rabbi takes the choice not reluctantly, but with two arms. Baruchu Hashem malachav, giborei koch, osei dvaro, lishmoa bekol dvaro, and I want to thank you for that, for taking that charge. I want to speak about the organization, but we can't in this week's parasha not mention Isha ki tazriya. Chazal in the Midrash and Midrash Rabbah say, in fact, they bring a pasuk. The pasuk in Iyov, Chaim v'chesed asita imadi, u'pkudatcha shamra ruchi. What does it mean? So the Midrash says, Chaim v'chesed asita imadi, the whole event of pregnancy is a miracle. And it brings different examples. One of the examples the rabbis and the Midrash bring is, can you imagine that somebody made a wallet, took a wallet with a bunch of coins, flipped it on the side and there's an open wallet, and the coins remain inside. A person walking around with a child, with an opening that the child can be aborted, can fall, and Hashem makes sure Hashem himself holds the baby in the womb. Chaim v'chesed asita imadi. Hashem makes sure that that baby does not drop. Chazal say it's impossible for us, maybe it's different, maybe they weren't in Miami, but it's impossible for us to remain 1 hour in extreme heat. I don't know what heat they're referring to. Miami can get very hot. And in fact, a fetus is sitting in the mother's womb in tremendous heat and alive for 9 months. Pele, Chaim v'chesed asita imadi. And then we have a choice and the ability to either be part of that Chaim v'chesed or to negate it. A woman faces the unbelievable choice at the end of the day. Do I go with Hashem's chesed? Do I keep this baby and bring life to it? Or Chalila, even though Hashem's holding that life, do I terminate it? In Israel today, there are about 40,000 abortions a year. It's sad to say, difficult to even voice. But many of them, as you'll see from this pamphlet, and you can read on our website, cribefrat.org, many of them face it because of financial concerns. They want to have a child, but they say, how can I buy, literally, a crib? Ma? We will take care of a crib? Because of a crib, you're going to abort a life? We know that raising a child costs a lot of money. It's not the cost of a crib. Many years we're going to... In America, bichlal, it's crazy. Yeshiva day tuition, it's absolutely crazy. It costs a lot of money. Nonetheless, Dr. Shusheim has found that indeed it's temporary financial stress. Right now, they don't see the baby. So the husband or the boyfriend says to his wife, says, we can't afford it. And I want to share with you one story. A woman who I spoke about 12 years ago in Canada told me an unbelievable story. She was a wealthy woman who had her husband had a very successful business. They had 2 wonderful children. She became pregnant with the third while her husband lost his business completely. And the husband turned to her and said, listen, we left our big home, we moved into a small apartment, we cannot afford another child. You must have an abortion. She said, but I am already pregnant. How can I have an abortion? He says, you have to have an abortion. We can barely feed now the 2 mouths that are in our home. How can we feed another? So the lady said, well, I won't have an abortion. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the woman says to the husband, if you're so sure that we don't have money to raise another child, you must have a vasectomy so I never become pregnant again. She thought that's going to stop him from asking her to have an abortion. Who will want to go through such a terrible surgery? He went ahead and he had the surgery.
Wow.
The woman went ahead and she had an abortion. And she said to me the following: for 8.5 months, I cried myself to sleep every single night, and these are her words, not ours, because I knew I murdered my own child. Hashem gave her chesed, and she decided to take that life that Hashem was holding in his own arms and terminate that pregnancy. I said, what happened after 8.5 months? She said, you won't believe it. The unbelievable happened. I became pregnant.
Wow.
She said, how is this possible? They went back to the doctor. My husband had a vasectomy. How is this even humanly possible? The doctor said, it's rare, but it happens. And she said, I knew at that moment that Hashem has forgiven me for killing the life of my own child. 8 months later, the baby died in uterus. She says to me, I'm sitting here talking to you today, 18 years later, and I cry myself to sleep most nights a week. It's a decision that I so regret, but I can't take back. Hashem was holding the baby, and I decided to terminate that life. And look at us now, she says. We're back to being wealthy. My husband has a great business, and we have these 2 children, and I live with the fact that I took the life of my third. Where were you, she says, 18 years ago? Where was the word of Efrat? Where was Rabbi Galimidi? We need Rabbi Galimidi to send this out, the message everywhere. Where are we? Rabbi Galimidi does his share. We try to do ours, maybe not enough. We need you to help us do the same. We, each and every one of us, has a question. Do we want to partner with the Chaim v'Chesed that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does, holding the life of the mother? How can we do that? We can do it by supporting a mother. We support a mother by alleviating their financial stress. How do we do that? So they say, okay, so we can buy a crib, but how are we going to feed the child? So we said, then how long do you think this is going to take place? We will take care of all of the needs of the child for 2 years. Every month, a package is sent to this woman with baby formula, with diapers, with wipes, clothes, bottles, basic substance. You could see it. Maybe we could show it here on the chat as well. You could see it inside this brochure. People packaging packages in our warehouse with everything for the baby. When the baby's born, she gets everything she needs. The crib, the carriage, a baby bath. But every month for 2 years later, for a total cost, this is the package, for a total cost of $1,500, not to save a life, not to get that opportunity. When Dr. Shusheim passed away, his son-in-law, the CEO of Efrat, said to me, Nir, I understand you're a lawyer. You've been volunteering for us for the last 16 years, and everywhere I went around the world, I was speaking about Efrat. You need to stop what you're doing and help us make sure we continue strong. Right now, today, we have 2 individuals from Mexico who came to America now in the Syrian community, Dafka in New York, and said, we have a goal. This year, before Pesach, an unbelievable goal, we want to save 1,000 babies. These are 2 donors. They took a plane on their own funds and are going around in New York to say, we must make sure that if Efrat has the ability to save children, as many children as they can save, we will provide finances. So we need your help to partner with us to save these Jewish souls.
How many people ask for your assistance?
So
On an average.
On an average year, we're saving over 3,000 babies a year. And we know we can do, unfortunately, double than that. So we are out there to make sure that there is not one child that is being aborted because of financial problems. Rabbi Galimidi mentioned fertility, and I have to say this. Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, I assume the name is known. Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, was a great friend of Efrat, but that's clear. To save a life, the Rabbanim are behind Efrat. But he said an amazing thing. There are two people that bring Geula to this world. We know, En ben David ba Achi kalu kol haneshamot shebaguf. There is somewhere in Shamayim a storage of neshamot. They need to come down to the earth to do their duties in order for all of us to have Geula. He says there are two people who bring Geula la'olam. One is Machon Pu'ah, that deals with fertility. Arav Menachem Borstein, a great man who helps people become pregnant with halachic supervision. He makes sure that they come down to earth. And Dr. Shusheim, who Dr. Shusheim makes sure, ba'avonotenu, they don't go back. They're already here. Let's make sure they don't go back.
There was a story with Rabbi Kanievsky, I believe, right? With your institution?
Correct. Rabbi Kanievsky, who obviously was, a great supporter. Recently, there was, unfortunately, a Haredi couple. It was a Haredi couple, not married. Two of them were divorced with children, who unfortunately were together, and the woman became pregnant. And they said, we're going to have an abortion. We can't have this. Not in our community. Somebody will know. They said, but to take the life of a child is much worse. Difficult maybe to manage in the community, but the life of a child is much worse. They said, what if we bring you to Rav Chaim Kanievsky? Well, can we have a private meeting with him? They said, we'll take care of it. If it's pikuach nefesh, Rav Chaim will meet you in a moment. And Rav Chaim met them and said, listen, you are going to get married, and Hashem should be matzliach darkechem. Don't worry, you have my bracha. Go ahead and have that child. Go and get married. They walked out of Rav Chaim's office. They decided to get married, and that child has been born. Gedolei Israel have unbelievable powers. They need the support of the community to be able to fund it, and they need the support of our volunteers in Israel in order to reach these women. Ve'achut ha'meshulash, this togetherness of the Rabbanim who are praying and assisting us, Rabbi Galimidi at the head, and those donors, the community, to be able to support us financially, and the volunteers, whether they are here in Florida or they are in Israel, to make sure we reach these women. And before the question, I just want to share one story about Miami that we just heard. We publicized this story just recently. There was a woman who came on a tour to see beautiful southern Florida, and somebody told her, she was a young adult, and somebody told her, listen, you can come here after the army, work in selling Yam HaMelech products in the mall. She decided to come and she sold products here. She realized in Florida you don't need English, you need Spanish. So she saw one of the boys that was in the carts. She said to him, can you tutor me in Spanish? He tutored her in Spanish. And then she took a liking to this boy, he took a liking to her, and they decided to get married. They said, no, it's mamash this time period of the year. It didn't happen now, it happened a few years ago. She said, in Pesach, we're going to go back to Israel. We're both Israeli. And we're going to tell our families that we're going to get married, Bezrat Hashem. All of a sudden, she discovers she's pregnant. She said, no, it's not such a big deal. We're going to get married anyway. So I'm pregnant, it's a bracha. We're going to get married, and we're going to have children. She turns to her boyfriend here in Miami, and she says to him, listen, I'm pregnant. He says, but pregnant? You have to have an abortion? He says, why do I have to have an abortion? We're going to get married soon. Why do I need to have an abortion? He says, well, listen, I want to make a little bit more money before we can have children. I want to get married, but I want to make more money. She says, okay, I would have liked that too, but right now I'm pregnant. He said, well, listen, if you're going to keep this baby, we're not going to get married. She was devastated. She went back to her parents in Israel. She thought at least they'll support her. And they didn't. They kicked her out of the house. They said, we're sorry, but you have to have an abortion. She said she won't. And a volunteer of ours found her in Israel, took her into her home, made sure she could carry out the pregnancy and offered her support, and she had this baby. 6 months after the baby's born, the boyfriend came on a visit to Israel, and he wanted to see his own son. She said, okay. He came over to see her son, and he said, you know what, maybe we can start dating again. She said, I'm not so sure, I'm very upset at you. You left me at my hardest moment in life. Efrat took care of me, but I did want a husband. Much more important than Efrat, I wanted a husband. He said to her, okay, and he kept courting her and courting her and courting her. They started dating for about a year, and they ended up getting married. And then together she called us back, and she says, I just want you to know now I'm out my feet thanks to your help. I just got married, and we're pregnant with our second child, Baruch Hashem, and I don't need your assistance. But you gave me the hope that I could actually have a family. So thank you, Rabbi Galimidi, for this opportunity.
Thank you. So
And I beg you to become part with Hashem as He's holding those babies in the womb. Help Him make sure they don't go back. There was a gentleman, I believe, who had a question.
Yeah. What is the context that all these couples find you, they know about you?
Mm-hmm.
And the second question is, what is the context of the all come for financial, or they do abortion because other matters, because they are single couples? Is all financial what you are doing, or only, or you aim to cover all the spectrum of possibilities?
It's a good question. When we say we saved almost 81,000 babies, those are 81,000 mothers that we provided financial support for. 2. We saved babies in other ways as well. The 81,000, there are mostly married. Almost the overwhelming amount of them are in a relationship. They might not be married, yeah, but are in a relationship. They're all adults. They're adult women. It's not teenage pregnancies. Sometimes we have questions that are either medically related. So in other words, in Israel, unfortunately, and it happens in America as well, some doctors are very quick to recommend an abortion.
Yeah.
So they send, we have a committee of doctors, used to be head by Dr. Shushaim, Alav Shalom, Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha, and today it's head by his son. Dr. Shushaim was a surgeon by profession, but we have a large board of doctors in all kinds of different professions. Today it's run by his son, Dr. Shushaim as well, Yonatan Shushaim, who is an obstetrician. And questions get sent to us, and we're asked one question. What is the relationship between the underlying diagnosis, which we are not providing, because they went to a medical doctor, and the recommendation to have an abortion? Unfortunately, many times there is a very loose connection, if any. Dr. Shushaim used to tell the story. One of the things he used to, Dr. Shushaim was just a great man, as you know. One of the things he was responsible of is he was responsible of all of the Mohalim in Israel for many decades. And he said a story that in one of the conventions of the Mohalim, a person came to him and said, listen, doctor, you never interviewed my wife and you told us not to have an abortion, even though the doctors recommended it. He said to him, I actually remember your case. Remind me just how many children you have. He was a Haredi rabbi, Mohel. He said, I had 10 children. He said, I remember. He says, because when I saw the underlying medical condition of your wife, it had zero to do with an abortion, but I realized why the doctors recommended it. You have 10 children already. You're Haredim. You might not have money. You have enough. Why should you have another child? And that child was born. That's not in these numbers. And in fact, we also are saving lives in Galut, here in Chutz La'aretz, mostly through your help. We have donors in our community all around the world who show us, when I go visit them, show us pictures and they say, you know, this is my nephew and niece. Because I knew about Efrat, I spread the word, and when I knew they were in need, and in their case it was financial, I said to them, don't abort. I'll take care. It's my own family. It's my own flesh and blood. I'll support you. So it's not only financial, but the 81,000 are those that are doing it for financial reasons.
And I'm sure there is a lot of counseling.
Of course. So we provide counseling, we provide support, and today we have a new program that you can read in this brochure called Working Mom. And what we realized that some of the stories that we deal with, it's very difficult for them to get out of the cycle of poverty. So now we are running a program that's much more expensive than the $1,500, that we're giving them vocational training. First of all, vocational assessment. We have a dedicated employee today in the organization to do this, and we provide to them any ancillary support that they need. For example, if we provided her a certain training to become, we have somebody who just graduated, she became a makeup artist. So she had to go to school to become a makeup artist, but she has a baby that we saved. Who is going to provide care for the baby when she is away at school? So we provided, until the government subsidies kicked in, we paid for that daycare. That alone cost us about $1,000 for those 2 months that we provided that support, just the daycare support. But with that effort, we're able to take them completely out of the cycle of poverty. And the last program we have is for women like this woman in Miami who was kicked out of her home. We used to have and are reinstating what we call safe homes, which gives a woman an opportunity to have an apartment of like-minded women that are in the same situation, supervised by a volunteer of ours that makes sure that they have a job, that they're working, they need to fend for themselves. They need to be the ones choosing to keep the baby, not us. Which just brings me to that point that Efrat, 81,000 babies, we do not know one case to date that baby was given up to adoption. All of these women are being raised by their birth mothers.
Wow. I think you had a question
Yes.
in the back.
You also have my question now. The adoption part. So many people want to have children. Why instead of killing the baby, just hand it down? Somebody would love to have a give love to that baby.
The question is asked all the time, and every time it's asked, I suffer tremendous pain. Because
Let me paraphrase the question for
Yes.
the audience
sorry.
watching live. So the question coming from the right side is why they going to go ahead and abort the child when there are many couples willing to adopt a child. So give birth to this unwanted child, God forbid, and then let benefit another family to adopt the child, correct? That's your question? Excellent. Go ahead.
So it pains me every time that question is asked, because reality is I get a call every other week, minimum every other week, with a donor saying, I will give you as much money as you need, just make sure that I get a Jewish child to adopt. The answer is, adoption in Israel is highly regulated by the government, and we cannot get involved. The Efrat organization does not recommend or get involved with the statements of adoption. If we do, then that could be grounds to, give us problems which we do not want to have. We want to continue saving babies' lives. But obviously, I encourage, those women, if there is such a situation, there are Jews all around the world who would like to adopt. However, you should know that the amount of women that have a baby in Israel and give up to adoption is almost zero. And the reason is because once a mother holds the child in her arms, who wants to give up such a gift? Then you understand the chesed she'asita imadi. You understand that completely when you're holding the life of that child. We know it's a miracle inside the womb, but when it comes out, it's an unbelievable miracle that nobody wants to give away.
Chazak u'baruch. Very eye-opener, very enlightening. Rabotai, תזכה למזוות to you and the holy group of volunteers. Thank you.
I want to mention the certificate that the rabbi mentioned. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach told Dr. Shusheim in the past, and that's how we devised this. He said to him, I am jealous of you, Dr. Shusheim. He said, you're jealous of me? You're a Gedol Ador. How can you be jealous of me? He said, yes, because Chazal say, Shekol HaMelamedet Ben Chaverot Torah Ki'ilu Yelado. It's as if he's given birth. I taught many people Torah. I have children by virtue of teaching. But it's only ki'ilu. It's as if given birth. You, Dr. Shusheim, are Yelado Mamash. Dr. Shusheim said it's not true. Yelado Mamash are those donors that make it possible for us to save a life. And that's why, from that recommendation of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Dr. Shusheim devised a certificate noting that every person saving the life of a child should know that that child was saved because of him. It costs $1,500 to save a life. A birth certificate, you don't know the family name, but you know the name of that child being born because you are shutaf to that birth, as Dr. Shusheim said, Shlosha shutafim ba'adam, aviv ve'imo ve'akadosh baruch hu. In every one of these cases, there's a fourth partner, and that fourth partner is Efrat through your help. Thank you, Rabbi Galimidi.
So, Rabotai, take the pamphlets, read them, get inspired, and try to do the best that you can to help them.
One last question.
Yes, one last question.
You say you save 3,000 lives and you could save more. What is the obstacle to save more?
The obstacle to save more is two. A, if you look in the pamphlet, you asked before, how do we get to these women? So a lot of times we get to these women, if you could see this on the screen, we get to them through putting advertisements on buses in the country, large signs in the country, which some people in Israel unfortunately are against because they say, this seems like religious propaganda to save a baby. Yes, it's to save a baby's life, but not only a baby, the mother who will regret that decision. We need to publicize it more, higher budgets to publicize it on social media, on the radio. Sometimes we have ads on TV to reach these women. That's number one. And once we have an influx of additional women, we have to have the resources with which to be able to provide to them. So the more we can advertise, the more women we will reach. And then we need to make sure that we can back that up because we do not want to find any woman coming to us chas v'chalila. Then now the question is, do we want to partner with a chesed or not? Yes, the answer is we will find a way to partner with that chesed. Thank you.
Beautiful, Rabotai.